The Coalition is vowing to spend $21 billion more than Labor on defence between now and 2030 if it wins the election. Peter Dutton will release the Coalition's long-awaited defence policy in Perth today, which will see military spending lifted to 2.5% of GDP by 2030 and 3% of GDP within the decade.
You've got two completely different plans. Labor plateauing at 2.3%, woefully inadequate, but the strong, decisive approach that we're taking will see 2.5% in 5 years and then 3% over the decade.
For immediate reaction to this, let's bring in the Defence Minister Richard Marles. Minister, good to see you this morning. So more details to come today, no doubt, but it is a big lift to current levels of spending. So what's your reaction to it?
Well, I just don't think you can trust anything that the Liberals put forward, and I think Australians have an absolute right to look at this with a great degree of scepticism. I mean, this is coming from the people who gave you $42 billion worth of announcements without putting a single dollar behind them. A full quarter of what defence was expected to procure under the Liberals, there was literally no money for. And when they did spend money, we saw 28 different projects running a combined 97 years over time. Now, what we've seen reported in the papers today is thin at best. There's no explanation of how the money is being raised. There's no explanation of where the money is being spent. Some reports describe this as a target. I mean, that just doesn't pass muster. At the end of the day, what we've engaged in is the biggest increase in peacetime defence spending in our nation's history. That is in the budget. It is money accounted for. We know exactly where it's going, what capability we're spending it on, and that is a total difference to the kind of vaudeville act that you see on the part of the Coalition.
But isn't the Coalition plan a proper spend to suit uncertain times with China and now Russia in our region, and shows your commitment that you've just outlined to be undercooked?
Well, maybe there's more to be seen later in the day, but I think it's a heroic call to describe this as a proper plan. I mean, plucking a number out of thin air without explaining how you're going to raise that and what you're actually going to spend it on, that's not defence policy. Doing that 10 days out from an election, Pete, is just a pathetic whimper when it comes to what they're doing in respect of defence policy. What we have done is the biggest increase in defence spending in terms of peacetime history in Australia, and it's in the budget. We know exactly what the money is being spent on.
It's barely moved in recent
and how
years,
it's being
though.
raised.
And isn't the Trump administration...
That's just not true, Pete.
The Trump administration wants us there at 3% of GDP, and other nations are increasing their defence spend, which is much higher than what it currently is. So shouldn't we be following suit?
And we are following suit, Pete. What we've done is the biggest peacetime increase in defence spending. $57 billion over the decade in the budget, $10.6 billion over the forwards in the budget. To describe that as barely moving just isn't right. By historic standards, it's the biggest peacetime increase that we've seen, and it's in the budget. Plucking a number out of thin air, describing it as a target or an aspiration, that doesn't actually do anything in terms of building our capability. Like, the Liberals go out there and think that you can win conflicts by press release. In actual fact, you need to build capability. You need to do the really difficult work of thinking through what you're going to spend that money on and actually delivering that. And that was a complete failure on the part of the Liberals in almost a decade when they were last in power. And to be honest, coming up with this 10 days out from an election when people have already started voting is just more of the same from a group who are a defence joke.
No, you're right there. People have started voting, and perhaps we will, and I'm sure we will see more detail on that a little later on. We'll have to wait for that, though. Just elsewhere this morning, Minister, you and the government have been hammering the opposition over its nuclear costs by quoting that $600 billion figure. But according to the Smart Energy Council, that's the highest end. The low end is $116 billion. So have you been deliberately misleading the public?
Well, we've not. I mean, this is the Smart Energy Council, in terms of the work that they've done, is relying on data that comes out of the CSIRO and AEMO. But I think the point to note here, Pete, is there's no queue of private investors out there wanting to put their money into nuclear. Everyone gets that this is the most expensive form of energy that Australia could pursue, given that we don't have any sunk cost in respect of nuclear energy today. And so this is definitely going to see power prices go up. But more to the point, the only way this could ever be delivered is by government paying for it, which means Australian taxpayers paying for it. And again, what the Liberals refuse to say is what they will cut in order to pay for it, because that's what they will have to do. And that you know, the Liberals have not refuted that. For all their attempt to muddy this up, at the end of the day, they are making it. They are refusing to say what they will cut to pay for this, and they don't contest the idea that there are no private investors out there for this. This can only be delivered through public money.
If we're talking about transparency and high end of costs, so you need to be more transparent about your renewable rollouts, which, if we're talking about high ends, would be into the hundreds of billions, if not $1 trillion.
Well, renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy that there exists
but the total
today.
costs, I'm talking about power poles, everything.
But what you've seen, Pete, over the last 3 years is an unlocking of investment, private investment in renewable energy, because the private sector understands that this is the way of the future, that this is a business in which they can make money, because this is a viable solution, which is in stark contrast to what Peter Dutton is talking about in terms of nuclear power. He is pursuing the most expensive form of energy. There's no one who's making any debate about that. It will take decades to realise, and when he does, it's only going to deliver something like 4% of the electricity grid, and Australians will have to pay for it, and he is absolutely not refuting any of that.
All right, I know you got to go, Richard, but as always, thank you for your time. We'll chat again soon.